Hi, I thought we could just discuss a little bit about transfer business with a different angle in terms of what clubs should be looking at before they let go of certain players and what they should be looking at before they bring certain players. But then, even as we look at that, I think the key question we should be asking ourselves is that in most of our clubs, who is in charge of transfers? What's on the ground mostly is that you have coaches being in charge of transfers. They decide who should come in and who should leave. But then the issue for me around that is that in our league, the tenure for most of the coaches is on average maybe 2 years maximum. For most of them, it's just maybe one season, maybe 1.5 seasons, and they are gone. But so are you going to let such a person be in charge of your transfer business? Because basically players are at the mercy of the coach. In the European setup, it could potentially work because I think their coaches get a little bit more time. Obviously, there are a few mitigating factors, but whatever the case, what can really work for us? I think the model we should adopt is one that makes use of what you would call, technical directors or sporting directors or whatever they are. These are people that are going to head a particular transfers committee, which is going to be guided by the club's philosophy and the direction that the club wishes to take. Why do I say so? Because I think there's a bit more security of tenure there. There is longevity in some of those positions, like a technical director, and guided by the philosophy of the club. I think it would be important. It would be good for them to able to head what you would call the transfer committees. But then, what's the profile of these transfer committees or the person that is heading the transfer committee? I think you need someone that has got a very good technical eye. You need someone that is business minded, and you also need someone that is really a strong negotiator. And I think in the next few minutes, I'm going to justify why I think one must be business minded, be a strong negotiator, and equally have a technical eye. Do you have profiles? Such people of such profiles in Zambia. We do have them, a lot of them actually, and I think we could make good use of them. But after all these qualities, I think these people are also supposed to have a lot of wisdom, a lot of patience, and also know the timing on which to look for particular players. And so let's look at the outs. What do you have to consider before you ship players out, or you discard players, or you send them out there? I think firstly we must consider that there's the concept of the ability and the capacity. This is something I spoke about a few weeks ago. So the ability is what you can basically see, what you see with the player now, but the capacity is the potential they represent for the future. And so upon making an assessment, when you think that the capacity to do better is not there, probably you can discard them. But then if you think that the capacity is there to develop further, I think it leads me to what I will now get into, which is possibility of loan deals. Loan deals, I think, should be given to players where you think maybe they may offer you something in the future, or maybe what they're able to offer now is not what you are looking for, but you believe strongly they can give you something in the future. Loan deals can be structured in different ways. There's a loan deal which you just a loan where you expect the player to come back, but then sometimes when you have a few doubts, you can send the player on loan and then give them an option to buy. For example, if they do not, if they do not feel the player is good enough for them, then maybe you can move on that player later on. At times, you can actually give a loan and an obligation to buy. What that does, as far as the business side is concerned, is that it reduces your cost in the present period, because the other team that takes the player on loan are going to be footing their bills, and so a player is still contracted to you, but then their bills are being footed by the other team because he's playing for them. The other option that could be considered in terms of outs for clubs, I think, is exchange or swap deals. But there are times when a player might be deemed surplus to your requirements at a particular club, but then another club thinks they can make good use of the player. Then coincidentally you may be interested in another player on the other side. So swap deals sometimes work. One player goes out, another player comes in, and you move forward like that. There are also times when maybe the player you're looking for might not really be valued at the same rate as the player that they are looking for. You can also push in a few sweeteners into the deal and make things happen. An example, when Liverpool were signing Diogo Jota, you remember that he was picked at 45 million. There was a bit of an issue with Wolverhampton Wanderers. So what Liverpool did is that they sweetened the deal by offering them a young Dutch fullback, Kiana Hoover. He moved to the other side. Liverpool had just got the boy for about 90,000 pounds, and later on, he was valued, and what they were going to get from Wolves at the later stage was around 14 million. So sometimes you can do some of those deals. It may not be a straight swap, but at times it's like you have what they are looking for, they have what you're looking for. You can get into an agreement like that. And now the crucial ones, I think it's like, what do you consider when you have to bring particular players in? For me, I think it basically boils down to the philosophy of the club and the style that the club wants to wants to play. And that is why I say that it's important that you have a transfer committee in place headed by a technical director who fully understands the philosophy of the club in terms of what you're trying to do now and what you're trying to do in the future. What is the philosophy in the most basic terms? The philosophy is a collection of ideas, beliefs, and thoughts of how you think particular things must be done or how you should go about a particular piece of business. And it is the philosophy that actually should even guide which coaches are assigned by clubs, and then players follow in that particular order. We should try and avoid situations where a coach comes into details, he's got his own philosophy, then after 6 months he's fired, another guy comes in with his own different philosophy. Then it's a lot of trouble for the players. They even get lost. The other thing that we should be looking at is scouting in a lot of ways. Scouting will help you identify players that will fit in your playing style. Scouting as well goes beyond that. It also goes looking at the duration of contracts for players that you are probably looking at, so that you could possibly get them on a Bosman rule. Bosman rule is where 6 months into the last 6 months into a contract, a player can negotiate with another club and possibly sign for another club. But then for you to know of such information, I think you need a very good scouting network. You also need a very good scouting network that would potentially know potential release clauses for certain players. I know that on our part of the continent, maybe release clauses are not very common, but I think going forward, that is something that we could potentially look at. It's also important that through a particular scouting network, you will know which players might be of value in the future, and then you sign them for less. Now, look, there's nothing wrong in a Zambian club going into the outskirts and maybe signing a player for even as low as 10,000 kwacha, because for some of these lower league clubs, that is a lot of money. Then see a boy that is 17, 18 represents a lot of potential. Signing him for as little as that, then work on him in the next few years will be worth many thousands or even millions of kwacha. But then it all dependent on the scouting network that you have. Also, the scouting network will help you identify players and know things like their injury history. There are times when a big player comes in, comes with a very big reputation, but then there is no knowledge about his injury history. Then signs a 2-year contract. In that 2-year contract, he's been injured maybe 4-5 times, has hardly played any football. It ends up becoming a loss to a particular club. And so with the use of a scouting network, it makes it easier to have such pieces of information and use them accordingly. The other key thing that you need to be considering when you're doing transfers, I think, is the issue of depth. Like I keep saying, it's about quality, it's also about quantity, but also it's also important to pay a particular attention to the age brackets. You do not want to have a squad that all players age at the same time. For example, it is believed, or science says, that forwards, for example, peak at maybe starting from 25 to 26. Defenders will probably peak around 27, and then midfielders will peak around 28. So imagine a case where all your squad peaks at the same time. Then what happens tomorrow? So it's important that even as you do this, this squad depth or quality assessment, you also pay a particular attention to the age brackets of players, so that to get players who at any particular time are going to ensure that the team is performing at its optimum. And that can only happen if you do not just get players that are going to pick at the same time. The other thing that I think you need to pay particular attention to when you are doing transfers is the wage structure and the costs. Look, we've seen certain clubs who are going to get into certain deals which end up being very bad deals, and clubs collapse because, look, it's a business, and when a business has too many expenses, too much more than their incomes and their sources, then it becomes very difficult to sustain such a club. So it's important that wage structures are paid attention to, as well as budgets. Then sometimes even when you're doing an outright purchase, look, you can structure deals in such a way that you do not pay the whole colossal amount at once. You can you put add-ons there, but even beyond that, if the outright amount is supposed to pay, for example, is 100,000, you don't have a capacity now, you might as well make a commitment of meeting that 100,000 over a course of even 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, it happens even at the top level of the game. It happens. Liverpool signed Thiago Alcantara for 25 million pounds, and their only initial outlay was 5 million pounds. So if it's possible up there, it should surely be possible to rush here. And like I said earlier on, that's why you need someone that is able to get into business deals, negotiate deals according, be a very strong negotiator and have a business mindset to know that whatever deal they get into now may not affect the club to a level of it collapsing either now or in the future. The other thing that would be good to look at is that I think there are always local solutions in clubs. That's why I keep advocating for clubs to have very strong youth foundations, very strong youth teams, because they are going to rely on these youth teams to provide players for them for their senior teams. The question is, maybe the returns from a youth development side are going to be slow, but then have a plan for the next 5 years, have a plan for the next 10 years, and you realize that if you get boys that are playing in the lower leagues, put them in your academy, shape them into what you want them to be, shape them into living your philosophy. Sure, you're going to get a lot of benefits from there, rather than getting players at substantial cost elsewhere. I think that's a model that helped Barcelona for a long time. Even in Zambia, you had a lot of clubs that had players coming from their youth teams. Some of among those could be even Power Dynamos, Yonkana. I think for a long time they relied on players coming from their youth teams, and so I think there's no problem in looking for local solutions which are provided by players that play in the local league. The other option that I think could be considered is player retention. The best piece of business you can ever do in any transfer window is tying down your key players. Give them new contracts. Give them contracts that are long enough and that have conditions that are make them willing to stay at your club for the longer duration of their careers. That's the best piece of business that you can ever do. Tie down your best players. Always have an eye on the contract durations. How much is remaining on their contracts. What is trending out there. What are some of the additions you can make to some of their contracts to keep them happy, to keep them giving you the best. And so player retention, I think, is very key in the transfer business. It's not just about going out there to bring players, it's also about maintaining those that you may have in your own roster. And then the other option which I think our clubs could take advantage of is entering into memorandums of understanding with some of these clubs, signing deals with some of these clubs where you become like a technical experts to them. You provide them with technical advice, provide them with technical sponsorship in terms of the kit, maybe exchange basis for some of the youth coaches to go and help them in exchange for players, so that they become like a breeding ground for some of the players. Even at the time when you may need to give some young players game time, you send them to some of these clubs. And I think it's possible in Zambia. A club in the Super League can have a deal with the team that is in the northern province, for example. They develop their young players, they send them over to the other side. Exchange works in that fashion. I think it's a less costly way of signing players, but because of the particular attention you're going to pay to them in terms of you being maybe their technical advisors or technical sponsors, then they'll give you players that you may be looking for. And then maybe finally we can look at the possible impact period of a player when he's signed as another key thing in terms of knowing which players to go for. Are you able to assess the kind of impact a player can bring? Yes, you're able to, because you've followed them, because you've scouted them, because you've seen them play, and you are able to gauge that given the performances that they are giving in a particular team at present, they might as well give the same to your team. At the end of the day, a team's sustenance really depends a lot in terms of the business that they do, because remember, it's results that generate money. It's results that keep a particular model afloat, and without them, then teams are surely going to struggle. And so in a nutshell, I thought that's what I could share today in terms of what clubs should possibly be looking at before they ship players out, and also before they bring players out. And ultimately, it's about getting the results that you're looking for and ensuring that progression is attained. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.